Well, today is the final talk in a short sermon series looking at Christian basics. These are the things that everybody assumes everybody knows, so they never get talked about very often in church. The kind of things we assume that new Christians will just absorb. So could you put up the title slide, please? We're thinking today we started off in this topic series thinking about worship. Then last week we looked about Bible reading. Today we're thinking about giving. And it might be a slightly longer sermon than usual, but I'm prepared to do a deal. If there is anyone out there prepared to donate £1.5 million to the church online straight away, I will tear up this sermon and you can go home early. Any offers? Okay. Actually, I'm glad that's a response, because when it comes to giving, having the right attitude is everything. You can pay the money into the bank account after the service, that's fine. But the first thing I want to say about giving is that it's not always about money. It's not just about money, it's about time and talents and skills. The second thing to say is, today's talk is all about money. It is about giving financially. Not because this is the most important, it isn't. But because I think this is the one that is least often talked about. So specifically, I'm looking at giving financially. Could you just try and recenter that, if that's possible? And in some ways, this is a bit of a thorny topic, because many people have the perception that the church is always after their money. The story is told of a rich businessman who lived on his own with a pet dog that he loved very, very dearly. One day, the dog died, and the businessman went to the tall, handsome rector to inquire if he could have a church funeral for the dead pet. Well, the tall, handsome rector told the businessman, "No, we can't do funeral services for animals in the church, but I'll tell you what, there's a new church down the road that seems a bit wild and wacky. Who knows what they believe, so perhaps they'll do something for the animal." Well, the businessman said, "Well, thank you, rector, I'll go right away. By the way, do you think £50,000 is enough to donate for that kind of service?" The tall, handsome rector scratched his head and replied, "Why didn't you tell me that your dog was Church of England? I'll do the funeral." You know, there are a number of myths out there about the church and money. One of the myths is that the state pays for the church in this country. After all, it is a Church of England. No, it doesn't. Perhaps people think the umbrella organisation, the Church of England, pays for all the clergy in this country. No, that's not true either. The Church of England, though, is often seen as very wealthy, and it certainly does have money. Much of it is in pensions investments and in buildings and land. And it's actually remarkably difficult to free up some of that money sometimes. The church commissioners, who hold the purse strings for the Church of England, certainly do have significant investments. But these are invested in a responsible way to generate income to support the mission and ministry of the church. So your generosity actually helps pay for me to be here. It's not the Church of England particularly, it's you paying for me to be here. However, I'll come back to that in a minute. Our church centre is a building very much used for the community. And whilst some of the things there are very finance-driven, a lot of it is community-driven. You know, we've got health and fitness takes place there. We've got the community choir. We've got older people's groups. We've got children's groups. We've got Narcotics Anonymous. We've got guides, and so on. We also open up our church for community use fairly regularly, for the schools to come in and use it, for places of welcome. Your money pays for the heating and lighting and the insurance of this building and the church centre. So, speaking of your generosity, it also helps pay for some of our sessional workers, for children and families' work. So what you give to the church actually has a real impact on the mission and the ministry of this church. So people often have this perception that the church is always after money. I said earlier on that you pay for me to be here. That's not completely true. You actually pay about 50% of the money needed to keep me here. Those investments I talked about from the Church of England pay the other 50% to keep me here. And the reason is because this church is based in a poor area, an area that isn't very wealthy, a socially poor area. So the Church of England does put its money where its mouth is. People often have the wrong perception about the church. And actually, to think about that kind of thing with money is probably sort of the wrong starting point. Because this is really about giving to God for his work. It's not about the church as such. It's about a response to God, not just about raising money so we can glorify God with our building. So today we're thinking about giving financially. And in everything I say to do, it might be helpful for you to know I have no idea how much money you personally give to the church. I have no idea. The only person I know about is myself and Priscilla. Now maybe you're pleased that I don't know how much you personally give to the church. But if that is the case, let me ask you why you might be pleased. Why are you pleased about that? There may be a whole load of reasons, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But today I want to start off by thinking about the problem of money, which we touched on in our gospel reading. There's lots that Jesus says about money. You might remember the story of the rich young man who came to Jesus, and he asked him, "What do I need to do to inherit eternal life?" Essentially, he was everything you might think a church was after. He was young. He was rich. He was a good person. Jesus loved him, we're told. Loved the way that he lived. But when Jesus challenged him to give away his money and put his focus elsewhere, he just couldn't do it. He had a problem with money. He had lots of money, and he liked the material possessions that went with the money. And like I say, Jesus picked up on that idea in today's reading. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, Jesus said. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. And Jesus is talking here about priorities, not holding on to one's material possessions. And actually, that is a really challenging message for our society and for any society to ever hear. Have you noticed how our society is obsessed with lifestyle choices? You know, the right kind of mobile phone to have, the right kind of clothes to wear, the right kind of trainers to wear. There's actually a British website called www.lifestyle.co.uk. If you go on it, there are 20,000 other websites linked to it, all to do with lifestyle. It's got loads of different categories. It's got things like 15,000 lifestyle guides, 1,500 lifestyle guides linked to arts and entertainment, cars and motoring, education and jobs, food and drink, health and fitness, holidays and travel, homes and gardens, shopping and gifts, sports and leisure, and so on. It's all about lifestyle choices. Our culture is obsessed with them and with material possessions. And I think that's what Jesus is really trying to get to in our passage. Because Jesus knows wealth, or actually far more importantly than wealth, the desire for wealth can be a sticking point for anybody on their faith journey. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I like that cartoon. And at the very start of our gospel reading, the clear message is that Jesus expected his followers to give. As a Christian, giving is not an option. Jesus assumes it's something that will be done automatically. The Bible assumes it is something that will automatically be done. But Jesus also tells us it's not about being seen to be generous. You know, Christian giving isn't about being seen to be generous. Rather, it's about how our motive for for living out the Christian life should be the reflection of God and his glory, not our glory. And whilst our Christian activity, the things that we do, might be seen, you know, they may be observed, they should never be done to reflect well on us. They should be done for the right motives. We have a God who is immensely generous. Look at all the rain he gave us last night. He's so generous. And our giving is a response to the things that he's given us, what he's done for us. So as followers of Jesus, we're expected to give. If that's the case, how much? What should we give? What's the right amount? When Jesus was on earth, of course, he was around at the time. His followers were Jews. And a really devout Jew would give in two ways when Jesus was around on earth. Firstly, a really devout Jew would give what's called a tithe. That would be a tenth of his income or her income. It would actually usually be his income. That was compulsory for a Jew. They had to give 10%, a tithe. But secondly, a Jew would also give by giving to charity. That was a voluntary additional giving on top for a Jew. So what it meant that a really devout Jew, in effect, would give would be about a sixth of their income, their total income. And in many respects, giving was the most sacred duty of all the religious duties for the Jews, and that's still true in other religions as well today. Now, of course, today we have things slightly different. We have a welfare system. We have the NHS, the National Health Service. We've got national insurance. We have benefit system, and so on. So should we still be tithing a tenth of our income? What is the right amount for us to give? I'll come back to that in a minute. But I am reminded of two men who were stranded on a desert island. The minute they got to the island, one of them started screaming and yelling, "We're going to die! We're going to die! There's no food, there's no water, we're going to die!" The second man was propped up against a palm tree and acting so calmly it just drove the first man completely mad. "Don't you understand? Are you crazy? We're going to die!" The second man replies, "You don't understand. I make £10,000 a week." £10,000? What difference does that make? We're on an island, there's no food, no water, we're going to die. The second man said, "Sorry, you don't understand. I make £10,000 a week, and I give the church 10% of that every week. My rector will fine me." What is the right amount to give? Well, it's for individual people to work out for themselves, and it will vary, but we do have biblical examples that can help us. So in the Old Testament, there's a character called Jacob. Jacob is basically a swindler, but he still gave 10% of his income. Zacchaeus in the New Testament, he was a despised tax collector. He gave 50%, half of his income away, in response to what Jesus gave him. What did Jesus give him? Dignity and a place back in the community. As we've heard, a really devout Jew in Jesus' day would give about a sixth. That's about 17% of their income. But interestingly, Jesus never says you should give this much. I think it's interesting, although I think it's also fair to assume that Jesus followed the spirit of the law as well. So maybe those kind of percentages are a helpful guideline for you to think about how much you give. But it's for you to work out, you personally. Your giving is between you and God, not between you and anybody else. And the amount can change over time, depending on the circumstances you're going through. It might go up, it might go down. In actual fact, to even argue about what percentage you should give to the church is rather missing the whole point. Now, I could tell you what Priscilla and I give, but that's not important either. It's the principles behind our giving that's important. Now, I know very accurately exactly how much money I give, how much of my take-home salary I give. I know because I have to do a separate tax return every year. And all the giving I do, I have to declare on that because I gift aid some of it. And I was looking at my giving last week, so I know exactly how much I give. But it also means that every year when I do my tax return, I can actually review what I give. That means I can check that I am practicing what I preach. I couldn't morally stand here in front of you if that wasn't the case. Reviewing what we give on a regular basis is a really healthy thing to do. And that is also true from a church perspective. Now, every year we have a finance committee who produce a budget for our church council. We always try and balance it. But this year we're actually facing a shortfall. We're facing about a £10,000 shortfall. And that means we're going to have to dig into some of our savings. It means we can't do perhaps as much work on the building as we would like to do. And we need to do an awful lot on this building, as you know. It might mean that some of the things we do this year can't continue next year. But reviewing what we give on a regular basis is a healthy thing to do. You need to review regularly. How often, I wonder, does our income go up? Maybe because we had a pay rise. But the amount we give is the same year on year on year. It's important to review. And believe it or not, even just a small increase can make a massive difference. So, for example, some of you might know, I like coffee shops. I love the table. I like going to Costa. If everyone, other coffee shops are available, I should say that. But if everybody on the electoral roll in this church, that's people over the age of 16, if everyone weekly gave an extra amount, say the cost of a latte, on top of their giving, it would raise an amazing amount for the church. Here's to some. Electoral roll, 183, weeks in the year 52, cost of a latte, the small latte in Costa is £3.70. Has anybody got a mobile phone that could do that sum for us? Somebody, if you've got a mobile phone, whip it out and just do that quick sum. If you've got your phone turned on, if you haven't, don't worry. Say again? £35,000, £209. £35,209. That's without the gift aid on top of it. What an amazing amount. That was just if everyone gave an extra cup of coffee, in effect, to the church every week. Now, think what we could do if we had that increase in our giving. Think we could choose to employ somebody else, perhaps a youth worker or a pastoral support worker to work in the community. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not asking you to do that. That would be like upping your giving per month by £15. And perhaps you don't want to give that much extra. That's absolutely fine. Perhaps you do. That's absolutely fine too. But the important thing is to review your giving regularly. And probably the best advice about how much to give is given by Paul writing in the New Testament. He says this: "You should each give then as you have decided, not with regret or out of a sense of duty." You should each give then as you have decided, not with regret or out of a sense of duty. Or as a well-known 20th century businessman put it like this: "It's not a question really of how much I give to God, it's about how much of God's money do I keep back." And that kind of moves us onto the next point about giving, the right attitude. I'm reminded of the story of a man and his family who were driving home from church. And the man was moaning like crazy. He said the music was too loud, the sermon was too long, the church announcements weren't clear, the building was too cold, the people were unfriendly, the coffee tasted horrible, and he went on and on and on, complaining about virtually everything. And finally, his observant son, who had noticed how much his dad had put into the collection plate, said, "Dad, you've got to admit, it wasn't a bad show for £1. So it's not about what is the right amount to give, it's what is the right attitude when we come to give. Jesus teaches us we should give quietly, as if our left hand doesn't know what our right hand is doing. And essentially, Jesus is saying two things here. He's saying, firstly, not only should we not be seeking other people's approval when we give, but also that our giving should not be self-conscious. You know, it's so we avoid the sins of pride and self-congratulation and self-righteousness. It should be considered, but not, aren't I good at giving? And as I said before, it should be a response to God, to what God has done for us. But it's also a response to what we see through God's eyes into the world. That's what happens when you start to be filled with the Holy Spirit. You look at the world around you, and you see the world differently. You see the world through God's eyes. And a wise person once said this: "You can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving." This isn't just to do with money, but I think it probably includes money as well. And Jesus tells us when we give with the right attitude, God's going to reward us. What he's not saying is that if you give away £10, God will give you £30 back. Instead, he says the quality of the reward that God gives you will be so much better. And instead of humans saying, gosh, there's a generous person, God, who sees the true motive of your heart, he'll be saying, well done, good job, you've done all right, well done. And he will reward you appropriately. Now let's just think about the idea of God rewarding us briefly, and remember, this is what Jesus says will happen. And I think there are two dangers to watch out for here. Firstly, there is a danger thinking, well, when God rewards me, it's going to be materialistic. It's going to give me things. You know, there are some people in the wider world who say that God will reward you materially with blessings if you give. You sometimes see that on Christian TV channels or satellite TV programs. That is not the true Christian message. What you give does not mean God is going to give you more money back. It doesn't work like that. And then secondly, there is a danger of the other extreme. And some people are very reluctant to talk about rewards for giving. They kind of regard it as a super spiritual thing. We don't talk about money in this church. You need to be aware of both dangers. You know, I was at a meeting just last week, as an archdeacon, and I was horrified to hear how many vicars won't talk about money in their sermons. Absolutely horrified. And it seems we're much happier about talking about sex or violence or racism, about justice issues, about homelessness. And that's good. Yes, we should talk about those things. Absolutely. Because Christianity is about the whole of our lives. Not the whole of our lives except money. We also need to talk about money as well. And the truth is, the Bible does talk about rewards. He says there are 3 rewards for giving, but most importantly, the focus is where the rewards come from. Sometimes it might be about material blessings, but often it's about spiritual blessings. God's smart enough to work out what you need at any given point in time. So our first reward, if we give in the correct way, is that God blesses us. God rewards us in what he thinks is the right way, not necessarily what we want or we think is the right way. And God takes whatever we give and he multiplies it. If you want a practical example from the Bible, look at the loaves and the fishes. Jesus turned it into the best picnic ever. Another practical example of this is from a church that I used to go to many years ago when I lived up in Clitheroe. And there was a man and a woman there, and the man happened to own a company. And the company became really, really successful. And because they were Christians, they believed in employing their staff in the right sort of way. So they would give their staff a bonus every Christmas. And bonuses of about 20% were not unusual to be given out at the Christmas party. What a great company to be part of. Well, in 1995, they were offered the chance to sell their company for £60 million. But they decided that although that £60 million would mean that they could retire successfully, they would never have to worry about anything again, what would happen to their employees? Would they have the same rights and the same bonuses if they sold the company? So instead, they decided they were going to float the company on the stock exchange. They decided they wanted all 550 of their workers to benefit from them. So they offered a special bonus that year. They could buy shares with their bonus money if they wanted when the company were going public. Not only that, they didn't just include the 550 members of their staff, they also included the subcontractors. Nobody missed out. When it floated on the stock exchange in 1997, the shares totalled a value of £136 million. The average workforce employee that day made £20,000. Not only that, if they kept the shares, soon after that it doubled and it trebled. Some made a lot more than that as well. And needless to say, the company owner made quite a bit of money as well. So what did he do with his money? Well, he invested it in a Christian charity, a foundation that gives millions and millions of pounds away every year. That's the background to this story here, the foundation of the Lancaster Foundation. This is a story of John and Rose Lancaster, who are friends of ours. And the book is called Give the Best Away. The Lancaster Foundation, this was published to mark 20 years of the Lancaster Foundation. But it gives away around £3 million to charity every year on the investments that it's got. See, God takes whatever we have and he multiplies it for his purposes. Another reward that we might get is being freed from financial worry. Why is that? Because God's able to always give us more than we need. You know, that's been my experience in the past. When we were short of money, God has helped out through the often generous and sometimes unknowingly generous actions of our friends and other people. You know, when I first started for training for ministry over 20 years ago, we were short of money. We didn't have a lot of money. Out of the blue, one of the churches we previously attended paid for us to go on holiday. See, God frees us from financial worries. That's something humans can't do, no matter how much they try. Now, I should point out that although God frees us from financial worry, that doesn't mean we should be financially irresponsible. God gave us a brain and he expects us to use it. A third reward of giving is seeing other people benefit from it. You know, and praising God. That should be self-evident. When we give, other people benefit. I guess it's obvious, but that's still a good reason to give money. Part of what it means to be part of a church is helping the needs of God's people. And again, this was something that Priscilla and I learnt many, many years ago in our married life. And it's to do with attitudes, I guess. We didn't have a lot of money. I was the sole wage earner. William had just been born. We only had one salary, and I was fairly new into the job. And we needed a pram. Two friends of ours had a child who was a little bit older and was just about ready for a new pushchair. So they offered us a deal on their old pram. And it was a really good pram, so we bought it for 50 quid. Well, a couple of months later, we moved house. We were relatively newly married. We had no furniture at all. Another couple gave us their old three-piece suite, a wardrobe and a chest of drawers, completely free. And whilst we were very grateful to both sets of friends, we also noticed a big difference in the way they had given. We learnt an important lesson about giving things away, not seeking to make profit and money out of them all the time. Money is not the most important thing in the world, and other things are far, far more important. But God rewards us when we have the right attitude. Those are just some of the rewards we get. And before I come to an end, I think it's important I talk practically about how we can give. The best way to give to the church, if you want to give to the church, is through standing order. There are forms at the back on our giving station. You can scan that QR code and you can give online. You can set up a standing order online. It's also in the notice sheet as well. Sorry, the service sheet. Another helpful way to give to the church is through weekly envelope schemes. If you want to get the envelopes and give weekly to the church, speak to Alison, who's in the congregation. Give us a wave, Alison. Alison, our finance officer, she'll help you that. Both of those ways are particularly good for the church because they allow us to plan our financial giving, our income. But other ways are great as well. You can give by one-off donations, even in envelopes or in lump sums, or by contactless giving, although it has to be said the contactless machine is not working today. Typical, isn't it? But again, both of these kind of ways of giving are available at the back. We've got envelopes if you want to give us a one-off. You can do that as well. There are many other ways. If you're a taxpayer, another way you can give to the church is to do it in your will, give a legacy. You can only usually do that once. And again, there's information about this at the back. But if you're a taxpayer, you can increase your giving at no cost to yourself because you can offer us gift aid. You don't pay any extra on that. The government gives us the money for that. So there's loads of different ways you can give. There's information at the back. And as Ben talked about this morning earlier on in the little video, there are other ways you can give by serving the church as well. So in conclusion, when it comes to giving financially is a Christian basic. We can't avoid that. Money's not the most important thing in the world, but our attitudes towards money are a really big indicator of our spiritual health. If you want to know how good your spiritual health is, look at your bank statement. This is all about giving as a response to God and what he's done for us. It's about developing the right attitude in giving. It's about giving generously with the right motives. Giving financially is a Christian basic.